Hello. So today we're going to start talking about Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson. We just finished reading the book. Maybe you read along with me on YouTube. That's fine. Or you read it on your own. It doesn't matter. But now maybe your teacher's asked you to write a theme essay or something about the theme of the book. So we're going to talk about theme, and we're going to talk about it specifically with Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to change slides. So just full disclosure here, this is nothing super fancy. This is exactly how I would do it in class. So hopefully it helps you just to plan out your theme essay or your theme paragraph and gives you some ideas. So first of all, we want to talk about what is theme. So when your teacher says to you to write about the theme of the book or story or whatever in this case, so you are going to start by thinking about a word. You're going to think, for example, happiness or fear or family or prejudice. I mean, whatever you decide to think about, you start with that word. And then you start to think about yourself and you say, okay, so what is the message that the author is trying to teach me? So throughout the story, of course, there's not going to just be one theme. There's going to be multiple themes. There's going to be multiple ways of looking at the theme in the story. But basically, it's always what is the message that's being taught? So when they're asking you for the theme, you start with a word, but then you've got to go bigger. It can't just be the story is about family, or the story is about slavery, or the story is about prejudice. It can't just be a word. We have to go deeper into that. What is the message that the author is trying to teach us? So then we move on to the next phase. So once we've decided that we're going to talk about, for example, family or prejudice or happiness or whatever, then we want to put it into a sentence. We want to try to avoid cliches. So for example, you don't want to just say things like, don't judge a book by its cover, or every cloud has a silver lining. You know, you're right. That is kind of a theme, but it's very cliche, and teachers don't like that. I'll just tell you right now, we don't like that. I want you to think deeper. So what exactly is the message about family that the author is teaching you in this story? So that's what we want to look at. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk about, first of all, what an essay would look like, an outline, just in case. Although to be fair, your teachers are going to have their own outlines, so do follow what they're talking about. But I'm just going to give you a kind of an idea, a little generic one. And then we're going to go into a variety of different themes that you could explore yourself in your essay or paragraph. Okay, so here we go. So for example, just leave this here. Okay, so for example, if you were going to organize a theme essay, again, your teachers might have their own template or graphic organizer or anything, and please, always use that. But if you don't, if your teacher just throws it out there and says, hey, write a theme essay, generally you'd probably do it in a 5-paragraph form. You can do it in 1 paragraph, but if you do it in a 5-paragraph, this is what it would kind of look like. Of course, you can take bits and pieces of this and you can use it however you want. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to start with the introduction. In the introduction, you want a hook. So that first line has to grab the reader right away. So it's got to be something about the book, something about, for example, with Chains, it would something be about, life-changing experiences, slavery, challenges, bravery. There's so many things that we can talk about with Isabel's journey through Chains. Then in the introductory paragraph, you have to include the title and the author in that paragraph. So make sure that it says Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson. Chains will be italicized or underlined, okay? Then you want to do a little nutshell background about the story. So just a little bit about what the story is about. Then you're going to finish the last sentence with your thesis statement or a claim statement. Some teachers call it claim, some teachers call it thesis. Basically what it is what am I going to prove in this essay? So I'm going to make a statement about the theme, and then in this essay, I'm going to prove it to you. So that's what we do. That last sentence is here we go. This is what I'm going to prove to you. Okay. And then you're going to break down the essay into 3 body paragraphs. You might mention what you're going to be talking about in your introduction. You might be able to say what you're going to be saying. Like if you're talking about family, you would talk about the 3 things you would talk about. You could put that into your introduction, and then you want to break it down. So in my class, we always talk about Peel when we do a paragraph. We make a point, and then have 3 E's. I know Peel only has 2, but we talk about 3: examples, explain, and evidence. Okay, so in the example, explains, and evidence, you kind of make a statement. So you give an example of what you're going to talk about. Then you're going to put in a piece of evidence that would fit that example. And then you explain how that example works with what you're trying to talk about. Then the last sentence is the link back to your thesis. So that's the Peel. So the point, example, explain, evidence, then link back to your thesis. Okay. So then we link it back. You're going to do that 3 times. So most teachers will ask you for at least 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. I would say 1 to 3. 3 is a lot. So depending on how big your quotes are, maybe 3 is going to be too much, because sometimes, I would say like sometimes less is more. It's like go for quality versus quantity. So I would say at least 1 for sure. 2 is good just because it kind of strengthens it up. And if you really do need to add a 3rd one, then go for it. But 3 per paragraph. Ask your teacher how they want you to cite those quotes. So is it an in paragraph citation? How do they want you to do it at the end? These are questions you have to ask your teacher, because each teacher is going to ask you to do different things. Okay. They're also going to ask you things like what size font you want, the spacing, how you want their headers. So these are all those questions you have to make sure that you ask your teacher how the teacher wants this done. Okay. Because every teacher, we're all different. Okay. So and then in the conclusion, we're just going to restate the claim. And then you want to finish with I always call it like a zinger. It's like, finish with something that's meaningful. You want to leave the reader with something to think about, or somebody when they go, wow, like, never leave your reader hanging. And in that conclusion paragraph, you never want to add anything new. You're really just restating what you've said in your essay. So you just want to close it all up. You want to tie it up with a nice little bow, and you want to leave the reader at the end going, wow, that was really cool. That was a great essay. So that's good. Also, what you want to not do in your essay, in your theme essay, is never say I. So it's not your ideas, because what you're doing, especially if you have a claim, you're putting that statement forward. So you don't want to be saying, I think this or I think that, because then that opens you for debate. So you want to make sure that when you write your thesis and when you write your essay, that you're putting it out there as it is a statement, it's a fact, and this is what it is. It's not what I think. This is what it is, and this is how I'm proving it. Okay. So then we're going to go into each individual idea or theme that you could use in your essay. And so what you could do is oops, sorry, I went too far. You could use 3 different themes for the essay, or you could just do 1. So for example, if you choose family as your main theme, 3 paragraphs where you're talking about how family is an example of the theme. Or you could say you could see the theme of family, of bravery, of slavery, whatever you can. And then each paragraph would reflect that. So it also, again, depends on what your teacher's asking you to do, but there are different ways that you can do this. Okay. Now we're going to go into each individual one. The first thing we're going to look at today is family, because of course that's a really good one to start with, and we know that from reading Chains that family is super important in this book. So we're going to look at the different types of relationships that you can talk about when you do talk about family in your theme essay. So for example, you can focus on one relationship, or as we talked about in each paragraph, you can focus on a different relationship in the book. So for example, you could have one paragraph where you're talking about how the theme applies to the relationship between Isabel and her mom and dad, mom and papa. And you can talk about how close that relationship is, even though they're not alive anymore. You can talk about how Isabel and Ruth, that bond of family. If you needed a 3rd one, which I don't have here on the slide, but you could talk about even the family dynamic between Isabel, Ruth, and the Locktons. Kind of a little bit tumultuous, but you know what? Still a family dynamic, even though they are, owner and slave. You can see that that's kind of there. So you could do that. You could also talk about different relationships in the story and how there is that family feel to it. For example, even with Curzon and Isabel, they're friends, right? That friendship, but it is almost like it's the only family that they have. So you can talk about different things like that. So what I did here is I pulled out some quotes for you. Now, of course, there are many, many quotes in the book that deal with family. But for example, one could be, one by one, they dragged us forward and a man shouted out prices to the crowd of likely buyers, and baby Ruth cried cried, and Mama shook like the last leaf on a tree, and Papa, he didn't want them to bust up our family like we sheep or hogs. Here in this particular quote, you could talk about, remember we talked about how we do example and explain. Example is that family bond. They were together at the beginning. And so you could talk about how important that family was. You can talk about how the family was broken up. And this is a really great example to explain how important family is. Your theme, your thesis for family would probably center on that importance of a family, and that you would do anything for family, and that family is there no matter what. So those are the themes that you can think about. Those are sort of the ideas you can think about when you're making your theme statement for this essay. So importance of family, they're always there for each other, that kind of thing. So you want to kind of focus in on that. Another one could be my mom and papa appeared from the shadows. They flew to me and wrapped their arms around me and cooled my face with their ghost tears. Remember, this is when she was being branded. So again, her family's always there for her. Even though they're not there physically, they're always there. That's how strong that bond is. So that's something that you can focus on. That's the message Laurie Halse Anderson is trying to teach us in this book, is that family is super important. And that's what you want to get across in your theme essay. I've only put the chapters here on the quotes as well, because there are different editions of the book. And so to put pages and things like that wouldn't work, but it's the chapter. So go to your book and find this in your book. The roar came again. I cocked my head and I listened. It did not come from the street nor the house above. It was not cannon fire. 'Twas inside me, a thought, thunderous loud. Ruth was alive in Charleston in South Carolina, not on a ship, not on an island, alive in a town I can walk to. Again, this is where she realizes that Ruth was sold, and that she's still alive and she's still there and she can get to her. That family bond, again, so strong in this book. So this is a great theme that you could explore in a theme essay or a theme paragraph or a discussion. If you're having a book club discussion, think about these things when you're talking about family. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next one. The next theme we're going to look at is friendship, because of course that's really also important in the book. And I mean, every theme we're going to look at today is going to be important. So it gives you lots of choices, though, if you really do have to think about a theme or a message that you're learning from Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson. Okay, so we're going to look at friendship. So the friendship between, for example, Isabel and Curzon, we know that that is super important, and it develops and it ebbs and flows, doesn't it? Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. So there's definitely different changes. But I think when you're thinking of your thesis statement for this particular essay or paragraph, you can talk about how friendships do change. They grow, and friendships are important, but sometimes, sometimes we have good times and sometimes we have bad times. And so how they change as you grow up or the situations change. So your claim or your thesis statement can actually focus on something like that. So that could be one between Isabel and Curzon, because we know there's great examples in the book of their friendship and what they do for each other, and the trouble that they get into, or the trouble that Curzon causes for Isabel, that kind of thing. So we can use many examples. We can also focus on the friendship between Lady Seymour and Isabel, which is quite unique and maybe not like what we would even consider a real friendship, but it is a friendship in such a way that they do have an understanding. And you know that Lady Seymour cares about Isabel. And I don't know if you would say friendship, but it's definitely a good relationship. And so almost on the borderline of she's really the only friend she's got at some point. And she knows that she's kind of there for her, but she's really not there for her. So again, that sort of friendship looks like many different things. Okay, but careful, that could be a cliche. So don't write that as your thesis statement. Think about what is the message Laurie Halse Anderson is teaching you in the book about friendship. That becomes your claim statement, or that becomes your thesis. Okay, here's a couple quotes that you can use. Again, there's many quotes in the book. I just put a couple here just so that you can see what kind of ideas we're coming up with. So half my roll disappeared in one bite. It was the first decent food I'd had since Jenny's kitchen. Curzon watched me without saying a word. When I licked the butter off my fingers, he gave me his roll. I ate a large breakfast, he said, chapter 6. So again, that's the first beginning of that friendship. It's when they're at the beginning of that friendship. And so that's an important part in there. After that, it fell to me to walk with Lady Seymour along Wall Street on days when the sun was strong. She hired 3 seamstresses to sew her. A new wardrobe included a heavy skirt and thick woolen clothes cloak for me in the order. I protested that I could not pay for the clothes, but Lady Seymour simply pointed to the portrait of a yellow-haired man. Chapter 33. Again, remember when she made the coat for her? You can see that Lady Seymour likes her and cares about her. And so that is a little bit of a friendship example. And then he freed me from the stocks. He's my friend, my only friend. There's another example of Isabel talking about Curzon. So, and we know that there are many examples of her, like, going to the prison in the end where she's helping Curzon. And, that again, he also gets her into some trouble too. So, there's that good and bad of that friendship. So this is a great essay or topic that you could talk about in a book club, that you could talk about the friendship and the goods and bads of friendship. And if you had to make any kind of chart where you were showing, pros and cons of the friendship, this is a really great theme that you can focus in on. Okay, so let's do the next one now. The next possible theme that you could talk about is identity. And when I say identity, I mean really like, who is Isabel? Who is she? And throughout the story, we watch Isabel battle who she is, finding her place in the world, trying to, discover who she is and to find freedom in her search for freedom. And so we look at, for example, Isabel's inner battle with finding out who she really is. And that's really hard when you're a slave, because you're stripped of your identity, you're stripped of your freedom. But at the same time, there's still that spark inside her that knows that one day she's going to be free and she's going to do anything that she can to get there. One of the things too was in the story where she was branded with the eye for insolence, right? But we also know that I is for Isabel. And for her, she says, she even says that to herself, and you can infer to it in many parts that, yeah, that I might mean insolence, but it also means Isabel, and it's who I am. And you can change my name to Sal, and you can change my name, and you can brand me, and you can tell me whatever you want, but I know who I am, which again comes out in her character, her strength. And so when you're writing your identity, if you pick identity as your theme, and then I would think about focusing on things like strength and inner self-confidence and bravery, and even just like self-discovery. Those are things that are going to really connect well with the identity theme. So when you make your thesis statement, you could talk about how identity really does, go together with that strength and bravery and inner confidence. So you can talk about that in your 3 different paragraphs, right? So that's where you could expand on that. So in your thesis, you want to mention identity, but you also want to mention what that means and what that looks like. Again, what's the message that the author's trying to tell you? And how are you going to prove that that's the message you think it is? So here's some quotes again from the story that are sort of like based on identity that you can use. Again, many other quotes in the book as well, but these are just a few that you can use. So for example, being loyal to the one who owned me gave me prickly thoughts, like burrs trapped in my shift, pressing into my skin with every step. Again, it's that she's questioning it. She has to do this because she's a slave. But, who am I really? And where do I want to be? I want to be free. And so how do I get to that? Number 2 here, the older woman sipped her tea. What is your name, girl? She asked me. Isabel, ma'am. I said, Isabel Finch. Ridiculous name, madam said. You are called Sal Lockton now. Again, you can change my name, but you can't change who I am, right? So she knows that. And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever. You want to call me Sal? Great. Interesting too, when we talked about this in my class, we talked about how the name Isabel, we talk about Sal. And if you think about, if you've done any French too, Sal means dirty, right? So it means kind of Sal is dirty. And it's sort of like, it's a negative. Whereas Isabelle, belle means pretty. If you think of the French words belle and sale, which I'm a French teacher also, so that kind of where I talk about it in my English classes like that. So you can even see the contrast. What is Madame Lockton trying to do? She's trying to steal her identity. She's trying to take that from her. But Isabel knows inside who she is. And so, yeah, great. You want to call me that? No problem. And she shows that throughout the story, her strength, her bravery, and her connection to that identity, which again comes down to friendships, comes down to family. So we can see how themes are all interconnected, okay? So that's really important, something you can put up in your discussions or your essay. Madam Shadow sideway glance at me. I prefer the girl branded with the letter I for insolence. It will alert people to her tendencies and serve us as a reminder of her weaknesses. We just talked about that, how they had the I for insolence, but really I is also for Isabel, and that's who she is. So again, this is a really, really good, strong theme essay if you want to write, or like I said, a discussion if you need to in your book club, or write a paragraph, or whatever it is. Identity is a really great theme that you can explore in this story really well. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So the next thing we're going to look at is slavery. Now you might say, well, of course, that's obvious. It's a book about slavery. But seriously, it is a message also that's being put forth by the author. So you want to look at now, how is this a message? What message about slavery is Laurie Halse Anderson trying to teach us in this book? So what you want to maybe you could do, and you might even be doing this for a social studies class, not even just an English class, because I know a lot of social studies teachers or history teachers, you use this book also in their classroom. So you might actually be looking at the historical focus of the theme. So there's lots of connections in history in this book, right? I mean, actually, most of the American history that I learned from this book. And that's not true, really, but a good part of it anyway. So we look at the role of slaves and how they were treated in the 1700s. And again, lots of historical connections that were leading up to the American Revolution, also known as the American War of Independence. So it talks a lot about in the book between the rebels and the British and the Patriots and all of that. So there's lots of connections between that. So you can talk about what role did slavery play during that time. So what did that look like? How were the slaves treated? At some point the Patriots were actually having slaves fight for them. What was their role? The slaves were kind of like going on either side too, right? They were saying like, hey, we're going to go with the British, we're going to go with the Patriots. It doesn't matter, whoever's going to free us, we're going with them, right? So you could see that, there were different thoughts on different sides. So for example, so that's kind of how you could also approach your thesis statement. So how was slavery portrayed in the book? What was the message in the historical sense, or even just in what was slavery? How was it portrayed? And of course, we followed Isabel's story, where at the beginning, she was with Mrs. Finch, and then she thought she was going to be free. And then from there, it didn't happen. And then she was sold again. And then she got to the Locktons, and then she wanted to be free. And she was talking to the Colonel, and he was going to be trying to make her free. And you can see the underlying theme here is she's a slave who wants to be free. So it's slavery and freedom connection. So in your thesis or your claim, I would probably mention something about that. So that would really, you could really do a lot with that particular statement. So here are a couple quotes that we can use if we're talking about slavery and freedom. So slaves don't read, Mr. Roberts said. I should beat you for lying, girl. Pastor Weeks held up his hand. It's true, your aunt had some odd notions. She thought she taught the child herself. I disapproved, of course, only leads to trouble. Again, it's a bit of a rules and order also, which we're going to do next. But again, slaves didn't read, they didn't have rights, they weren't free, but she was free, and she knew that she was free, that Mrs. Finch had actually freed her, but of course there's no will and all of that. So again, it comes down to, how is slavery portrayed in the book at the beginning. And then it keeps going, and it says, you are a small black girl, country, Curzon said bitterly. You're a slave, not a person. They'll say things in front of you they don't say in front of white servants because you don't count to them. Again, super example of what the role of the slaves were during this time. They were invisible. And this is where she spies. Remember, Curzon asked her to spy. And he was like, just sit there and listen, because you're not even a person to them. That's how bad it was. So talk about that, talk about how those slaves were treated during that time. So this is something that you could really develop into a really great essay or discussion in class, okay? Last one, I went cold with anger, then hot, then cold again. It wasn't right. It wasn't right for one body to own another or pull strings to make them jump. Why was Madam allowed to hit me or treat Ruth like a toy? Again, here we go about the treatments and how they were treated during this time, what slaves had to endure. So these are really, really great things that you can talk about in your essay, really powerful things. So yeah, and I'm sure, and you're going to find tons of other examples also in the book that you can use for quotes. So yeah, this is a really good theme that you can focus in on. Or like we talked about, you can choose a little bit of both, right? You could choose it like the ones we've talked about before, and you can then add in this one as well. Okay, one more, and then we'll be done. Okay. So the last one we're going to talk about is courage or bravery. And there is certainly many examples of Isabel's courage and bravery in this story. I mean, just think about all the things that she's been through. It's crazy. So this is a really good theme that we can focus on. So what is the message, again, that Laurie Halse Anderson is teaching us about courage and bravery through Isabel's actions and Isabel's personality? So she demonstrates courage throughout the story in so many ways. I just wrote a possible claim here. I know I didn't do it for the other ones, but just an idea, like Isabel uses her kindness for others to overcome her fears of being punished for her actions. So something like that. Okay. So we want to talk about how does she use her bravery? It could also have a connection to the freedom. So, Isabel uses her courage and bravery to find her way to freedom, something like that. So that's a claim that you need to prove, right? So how do we do that? We find quotes to support it, and then we explain and we give examples. Remember that peel that we talked about, or again, your teachers might call it something else. That's what we call it in our class. So here we go. So we have a couple quotes. So for example, my belly flipped with worry. I was breathing hard as if I'd run all the way to the village and back. This was the moment we've been waiting for, the one that Mama promised would come. It was up to me to take care of things, to find a place for us. I had to be bold. This is right in the beginning. Remember where she's in the cemetery and she knows that she's free because she said there was a will. And she's excited and she's got courage, but she has to be courageous because she's got Ruth. She's got to look after Ruth. She's got to find a job. She's got to make her way now. So again, we know that doesn't happen because we've read the book, but so yeah, she's got courage there. She's obviously showing courage or bravery. If I opened the gate, I would be a criminal. Slaves were not allowed out after sunset without a pass from the master. Anyone who caught me could take me to jail. If I opened the gate, a judge would order me flogged. If I opened the gate, there was no telling what punishment madam would demand. So remember, this is where she's doing the spying for the Patriots, right? So she's scared. She's really scared, but it's like, again, fear overcomes the sense of wanting freedom. So that courage is what takes over. She's scared, but she's courageous, and we know what she does as a result of it. We also know what happens as a result of it. But again, those are the examples. Those are the explaining that you're going to do. And then you link it back to, she overcomes her fears and her fear of being punished because freedom is so important to her. Did you sell Ruth? You will not address me in that insolent manner. Her voice shook a little. She took another step. Answer me, you miserable cow. Did you sell my sister? I have to say that's probably one of my favorite quotes in the entire book. Wow, like she is so bold. She is so courageous. She stood up to Mrs. Lockton. I'm Lockton. I mean, crazy stuff, right? I mean, she calls her a miserable cow. I mean, does that take courage? I think that takes courage. You're a slave girl. You're a young girl. But again, bravery, courage. She's angry. She wants her freedom. So many great examples about courage in this book. So that's it for our discussion on themes and different types of themes that you can find in the books Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson. Of course, there are more. That was just a few examples of what you can use if you're writing a theme essay or having a discussion about theme or anything that you're doing in class, a book club discussion. So hopefully that you found that helpful and you enjoyed it. Please leave me a comment. I really love it when you guys write me comments, nice ones, please. I do answer them. So, and thank you for subscribing. When I started this, I literally thought I'd have like nobody ever watching it except for my own students, and to get comments from people all over the world is really cool for me. So thank you very much and good luck with your essay. And if you do have any questions about how to write the essay, or if you have any questions about the discussions or claim statements or anything like that, put them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them for you. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.